Being human. Do you ever wonder what makes us who we are? Our habits, preferences, or where we came from? We are expressing ourselves in thousands of ways every day through our choices. Let's have a conversation with people who are having interesting lives. My name is Alun Walker. I'm a doctor of chiropractic and a human being. Hello, I'm Alun Walker. I'm a doctor of chiropractic, and this is my second podcast in the series of Being Human. Very fortunate today. We've got a great PT with us who works in Daventry. A very, very interesting life. And when I heard a little bit about it, I thought we must get him on the show. I think it would be really interesting for the listeners to find out more about Andrzej Zyms and where he was born, where he's come from, and eventually how he became a PT in the Daventry area. But there's an awful lot of very interesting things about you and your life, and a lot of places that I want to talk to you about that you've been. So if I could ask you first, Andrzej, whereabouts was it that you were born?
I was born in Poland, in Warsaw. So a fair old time ago, almost 50 years ago.
You were never 50.
Nearly
49.
49, so 50 next year.
Okay.
So yeah, born in Warsaw. Spent the first 6 years of my life there, and then came to the UK in 1980.
So, Polish passport?
No, Polish citizenship, but I don't have a Polish passport anymore. So British citizen, and just to throw into the mix a little bit of confusion, Australian passport as well. I am eligible for a Polish passport, which following Brexit I will be applying for.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to talk about.
Just to make my life a little bit easier travelling around Europe. So yeah, I will end up with 3 passports in the not too distant future.
And how did you end up moving to did you come from Poland to the UK or?
Yep. So again, a slightly interesting, convoluted story. So whenever anyone asks me where are you from, it's like, do you want the short version or the long one?
Oh, we want the long one.
We'll go somewhere in the middle. So my father was a newsreader. So in Poland, he used to do the 9 o'clock news. So people of our generation would sort of remember the newscasters of the sort of the 80s and 90s. Trevor McDonald always sort of springs to mind for people of our sort of age group. So he was basically the 9 o'clock newsreader. In the end of 1970s, 79, 80, he was posted to London to act as foreign correspondent for Polish TV news. So family came to London initially for a 2-year stint. And then the troubles started in Poland, martial law, etc. And we ended up staying in the UK from there on. So initially in London and then moved around a little bit. Again, some interesting little bits of life. So it was, my dad applied for political asylum for the whole family, obviously. And because of his profile in Poland, there was a fear that my sister and I would actually get kidnapped to force him to go back. So we had a few different agencies looking after us that back in the 1980s didn't officially exist. They do now, namely MI6. They looked after us for a few years, moved us around until everything calmed down, certainly in Warsaw. And in Poland, the sort of political spectrum changed slightly. Things became a little bit easier, and we became British citizens and stayed in the UK from there. So moved to Reading and grew up essentially in Reading up until my sort of early teenage years.
So you sort of left due to the breakdown of the Soviet Union?
It was prior to that, so that there was the sort of the start of what I suppose that the Eastern Bloc would class as the Troubles. So that there was things were already starting to go a little bit amiss, but it was before the Soviet Union breakup. So 1981, martial law was inflicted or brought upon in Warsaw. curfews, etc. And at that point, all the foreign correspondents, all of my dad's colleagues were being called back. And essentially, as soon as they got off the plane, they were put into prison. And my dad got the phone call saying, "Can you come back, bring the family back?" And he said, "Thanks, but no thanks. We're staying here."
Did you live anywhere else? You remember something about you lived in Berlin for a while?
Yep. So at the age of 13, so my dad then subsequently got a job with the BBC monitoring service. So he was translating essentially Polish news, regional news, radio news into English, and then that was analysed by various agencies in this country used for news and intelligence. And at 1987, he was asked if he wanted to go to Berlin and do the job over there. Obviously, a lot closer to Poland. They could pick up more regional radio stations. So I was given the choice of, would you like to go to Berlin with Dad for 3 years, or do you want to stay in England with Mum? And having sat there on the stairs in tears for about 10 minutes, they said to me, "Look, if you go, you don't like it, you can come back." So I decided to go. And that was probably the best decision that I made, was going to Berlin with Dad.
English-speaking schools?
Yep. So I went to school it was West Berlin, so I went to school on a RAF base with all the forces brats and some diplomats' kids, but essentially it was a school for forces kids on an RAF base in Berlin.
And that was about the time of the wall?
It was indeed, as coincidence would have it. So yeah, I was there from 87 till 1990. Wall came down in 89. And at the time, the day it all happened, we had it was called then, I don't know what it is now, it was BFBS, British Forces Broadcasting Services. So it was British TV channels over there, radio channels, etc. But for some reason, we had no British TV that evening. So I got home from school. Dad used to work till 8 o'clock in the evening. So I was essentially latchkey kid, go in, make some food, do my homework, stick the TV on, and then make dinner for him ready when he got home.
Good kid.
Absolutely. So my cooking skills improved over the 3 years when I lived over there with him. So I had the German TV on, couldn't understand all of it, although lived in Germany, but it was a forces school, so English speaking. But the bits I could pick up, it's like, there's something going on here. So I phoned up my dad, said, "Have they actually opened the wall?" He said, "Not yet, but it looks like it's going to happen." And then he phoned me a couple of hours later. He said, "Yeah, they've opened the wall." Turned TV back on, had a look, and there was crowds already building at Checkpoint Charlie. So I said, "Right, I'm off. I'm going to Checkpoint Charlie. I'll see you when I see you." He said, "Absolutely no chance of you going down there." I was like, "Why not?" I said, "Because you're waiting for me, and then we'll both go down." So he got home at 9 o'clock in the evening, and we jumped on the underground, went to Checkpoint Charlie, welcomed all the Trabants coming across the border, and walked along the wall to the Brandenburg Gate.
Yeah.
On top of the wall at the gate. And recently there was the anniversary sort of TV program, documentary of the wall coming down. I think they made it for the 25th anniversary. And if you squint, I have actually, my sister actually sent me a text message when that was on saying, "Is that you on the wall?" And there is actually a shot of me. And if you squint and look to the left slightly, I am actually up there on the wall.
Wow.
in one of the shots with the all the news stations up on the platforms overlooking the wall.
I've been to Checkpoint Charlie. That was amazing for me just to experience being in that area. And you were actually on the wall.
Yeah.
Although just talking, I can clearly see that there's. We could join the dots up. We've got. You were here when we've had Brexit. You were here with the break come down of the wall, and you were in Poland with all of the Eastern European troubles. So it's,
I'm a troublemaker.
I don't know. Hopefully,
maybe interesting times follow me around. I don't know.
Yeah. So what happened then after? So in Berlin.
Yep.
What would you have done after that? You finished school there.
Yep. So I did my GCSEs in Berlin, and then moved back to the UK when Dad's posting finished, which coincided with me finishing school, and then college in Henley-on-Thames.
Nice.
So I did my A levels in Henley, and then straight into work from there.
What was the work?
Initially, it was I worked for Prudential Assurance, so working in their sort of pensions, life assurance admin. At the time, Reading's biggest employer by far was Prudential Assurance. That was essentially their head offices. They had, at that point, probably 5 or 6 office buildings in Reading. So that was a rite of passage almost at the time. In the early 90s, that was where everyone went and worked. I got rather bored with the admin side of things, so I started dabbling with IT. Got an internal transfer into one of their IT teams, and ended up working my way up through that, primarily in software testing. So basically trying to break their IT systems and telling them what's wrong with them. So yeah, IT was the sort of the first real job.
I think it still is big down there, IT work. I know that I think Amazon have got a huge place down there. And
yeah, they've I think Oracle are there as well. So yeah, IT and sort of software is still pretty big around that area. Prudential themselves have sort of moved on now. They've outsourced a lot of their stuff from what I understand. But it was becoming, even sort of in the late 90s, it was becoming almost sort of Silicon Valley, because it was close enough to London, but still a lot cheaper than London. It was 25 minutes on the train to get to Paddington. So a lot of the larger IT companies were setting up shop in Reading at the time.
Where did you go after that? What was it? Did you stay in this country? Or
so after that was, where are we? So 2 or 3 different jobs in the IT world, all around that sort of Thames Valley area, so Reading, Slough. And then in 2002, I found out I was being made redundant. And again, by pure coincidence, an opportunity came up for me to move to Australia, initially on a 2-year contract with my partner at the time. And again, everything just seemed to line up. So the redundancy money, it wasn't huge. I hadn't been with that company for very long, but it paid for my airfare to get to Australia. And it meant I had a couple of months of slack when I got to Australia to find a job. So off I went. 2002, moved to Australia. Like I say, initially for 2 years, but ended up staying there for 13.
So you're working when you were there? What sort of work were you doing?
Again, initially straight into IT. That was the sort of the path of least resistance almost, stick with what I know. But then after about a year of that, realised that there was a gap in the market, certainly in Brisbane. At the time, Brisbane back in the early sort of 2000s was still a big town as opposed to a capital city. And it was more about who you knew, contacts. It was a very small town feel, although an awful lot of money, and it was a massive city. And the gap in the market for someone that understood the IT industry that could also do recruitment and place those people. So took a risk, went out on my own, set up an IT recruitment company. In its heyday, I had 8 employees, turning over somewhere in the region of $5 million a year.
Wow.
And yeah, it was going gangbusters, did very well. And then I got to a point, it wasn't directly related to my father's death, but it was around the time when he died. I sort of started getting a bit twitchy and thinking there's more to life than just chasing money. And then after I managed to actually come back to England a week before he passed away. So spent a week with him. I was here when he died, and then went back to Australia. Had a bit of a reevaluation of things back then, and decided that I wasn't going to do what I had to do anymore because I didn't have to do it. There was no kids in the mix. There was no debt, so I didn't need to keep chasing money.
Yeah.
And decided that I was going to do what I wanted to do. and that was move into the fitness world and PT. So
Wow, that was a
personal
big
training.
change.
Yeah, so it's basically some would call it a midlife crisis, but I've sort of essentially gone from running a multi-million-dollar company to probably now being the poorest I've ever been, but probably the happiest.
Was that the first time you ever picked up a dumbbell? Or
No, I'd sort of trained on and off for most of my adult life. So from the age of sort of 18, 19, in and out of gyms, but more just playing at it. Never really any great focus. Still pains me to say it now, but up until the time I moved to Australia, I actually used to smoke. So I'd be walking out of the gym with a cigarette in my mouth and didn't think anything of it.
They were the days, though, weren't they?
But yeah, it was something that I thought I wanted to do, and at the time I had nothing to lose, because it didn't mean closing the company. It just meant I left the people that were working for me to carry on working for me. I went away, studied, still worked when I had to, and as it turned out, the PTing increased. The time I spent in the fitness industry increased. The time I spent in my recruitment business reduced. So naturally, the balance shifted, and I essentially sort of moved into the fitness world full time and just left a couple of people in the company ticking things over. We still ran return business, word of mouth. I stopped selling in it, and that sort of dwindled down over time, and I guess the passion took over.
Yeah, no, I've been in a similar situation myself in my life. And so you didn't ever do any other sports in your early...
In my early 20s, well, I used to water ski when I was at school. So being at school in Berlin and it being a forces school, we had access to all of their sports facilities, which included the British Berlin Yacht Club. So windsurfing, water skiing, sailing were all activities we could do for games and PE. We also, yeah, not bad. In winter, it wasn't just go and play rugby or football. We had the option to go ice skating, open air ice skating rinks. So the opportunities I got by being in Berlin, other than educational, was just out of this world. And one of the things that I sort of got a bit of a passion for at that point was water skiing. Having come back to Reading,
it's always the coolest looking sport.
Yeah, once you can do it, it looks pretty good. So back to Reading in early 90s, and then found a water ski club. It was actually run by a guy called John Battleday, who in the 80s, 90s, he was world-class water skier.
For the UK?
Yep, British guy. He still actually runs a water ski school near Thorpe Park, JB Water Ski. And basically it was fully professional setup. So they had boats, they had coaches, turn up, pay your money and get taught to ski. And as the time sort of went on, I thought, I'm not too bad at this. And then eventually started competing in the British Water Ski League.
Wow.
So that would have been sort of probably mid-90s by that point, up until moving to Australia. So for probably 5-6 years, used to travel during the summer all around the country, competing at various sites in water skiing. Wasn't the best at it, but it was something I enjoyed.
You were competing at a high level by the sound of it.
Yeah.
Was there much of that done in Brisbane, water skiing?
Initially, we struggled to find anywhere. The thought in Australia of paying someone to take you water skiing was very alien, because over there they're very outdoorsy. Everyone's got their own boats, and they just over there you can go water skiing on the river. So you could literally ski on the river through the centre of the city. Imagine doing that in London.
Yeah, no.
Wouldn't happen.
No.
But we eventually did find a water ski lake which had a similar setup to what I was used to here, and I started competing again over there. 2013, I was part of the Queensland team in the Australian Nationals, which were taking place down in New South Wales. So I skied in the Australian National Championships for Queensland as part of their team. and I was ranked 152nd in the world that year in the over 35 senior men's division. So that was my little claim to fame.
Yeah.
152nd in the world isn't too bad.
No, not really. No, I think those are something to be proud of. 8 billion people on the planet, 157 of them can actually water ski at that level. And so you eventually you got bored in Australia. You decided to
so there was a sort of a natural window of opportunity with the business dwindling down. I didn't want to leave Australia while the business was still up and running and very successful. And as the balance shifted, there was an option to buy a gym over in Brisbane. That didn't work out. The finances didn't stack up. When I looked at the books, things just, there was too many red flags. So it was either try and find another business over there or come back to the UK and essentially start again as a PT in the UK. So that was the option that we ended up taking, and came back to the UK in 2015. Initially worked for a large commercial gym as an employed PT, and then just over 2 years ago started as self-employed personal trainer in Daventry.
Got you. Okay. And your average clients, what sort of people are they that go to the?
There is no average. I mean, I've literally got everything from girls in their 20s to people who are probably, I've got one lady who's coming up to 60. It is the full spectrum. Some have got very specific goals, be that strength or training for events. Some, it's a confidence thing. So they sort of use me because they'd never walk into a gym if I wasn't there. And that's kind of why I do the job. And that's only become apparent in the last few years. I think as I've got older, I've appreciated what I do and why more so. So, you know, it's the guy who would have probably had the hell bullied out of him at school, would never walk into a gym because he's skinny, he's very self-conscious, has a chat to me, what do you think? Yeah, come in. The only time he comes into the gym is with me, comes in 3 or 4 times a week. And the change in him mentally is actually, for me, more satisfying than seeing his physical change.
Yeah.
Because now when he comes in, he holds himself differently. You can see there's a confidence about him. It's not about that, yeah, he's got slightly bigger chest and he's got muscles here and muscles there. But it's just his own self-confidence.
How he thinks about himself,
yeah,
how he thinks about his own body.
Just his own self-esteem has changed. You know, it's the person with autism and ADHD who, again, would never go into the gym on their own, phone me up, can we have a chat? First time they came in, wringing their hands, sitting in the corner, looking around, absolutely petrified. Now, after probably 18 months of training with me, happy to go into the gym on their own. So now only trains once a week with me, goes in on their own 3 or 4 times. Yeah. But when they first started, it was 3 sessions a week with me, would never step into the gym on their own.
So psychological changes with people. And of course, there's other changes as well, isn't there? There's the physiological changes that helping
I think
people understand health.
And I think that the two are very much interlinked. If your body's healthier, your mind's healthier. And if your mind's healthy, your body's healthy. It's got to happen together. It's all good and well going to the gym and then going down the pub straight afterwards and having a couple of pints going, yeah, I've done my bit. But mentally, is that going to really solve anything? Is that going to help? Physically, you're probably undoing everything that you've done in the gym. But ultimately, if you're happier in your own skin, you'll be happier in your own head. That's my view on it.
Yeah.
You know, people who aren't happy in their own skin are generally the ones that are unhappier in their mind. So that the two are very much linked.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. What's your take on hydration and these days. People are drinking plenty of water. I mean, how much water do you think is enough?
Personally, I don't think there's ever enough. I mean, our bodies are anything from sort of 55 to 60% water. We are essentially walking water vessels. You only need to lose 5% of that before things start going wrong, 10%, and you could end up in hospital. So, for me personally, I've just got into the habit, and then this has been happening now it's probably about 5-6 years ago I started it. Bottle of water next to my bed. First thing I do when I wake up is I down the entire thing. So, we're not talking a massive bottle, probably 700 ml. Start off with a glass, then make it a larger glass. But that, to me, just sets me up. So literally wake up, roll over, down a pint of water, and that just starts things going. So before I've even got out of bed, essentially.
Do you find it helps you wake up as well?
It does actually, yeah. It just becomes part of the routine, rather than sort of rolling out of bed and bouncing off the walls trying to find a coffee. Don't need a coffee, just down a water and then do whatever, and then go and put the kettle on, have a coffee, have your breakfast. But what a lot of people struggle with, and it's food marketing, I think, has a lot to answer for. Social media has a lot to answer for. I think those two things in conjunction have actually broken the fitness industry and people's perception of health and wellness, because we're essentially lied to by food marketing and drinks marketing. There's obviously now everything's got extra protein in it. You walk down the cereal aisle, you got extra protein. The ingredients haven't changed. Muesli has always had nuts in it, which is a source of protein. Now, muesli with extra protein. It's exactly the same recipe as it was 10 years ago, but now because it's got the word protein on it, people are going to have some of that because that's good for me. And obviously, with the extra word of protein, up goes the price.
Yeah.
The food industry is very good at upselling and selling what they want to sell. Same goes for drinks. Energy drinks. Probably the most popular thing on the market right now. Loaded with sugar, loaded with caffeine. And the fact that you can't actually buy them if you're under 16, I think is probably a good thing. Although I guess a lot of supermarkets and smaller retailers don't really sort of bother with that. It's not as regulated as sort of cigarettes or alcohol. But those energy drinks, there's absolutely no nutritional value in those whatsoever. And people, because of the way that they're sold to us, people believe that if I get that, I mean, even when we were kids and you were ill, Mum always got a bottle of Lucozade. Well, that's just sugar.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's no vitamins, there's no minerals, there's no nutritional value in it. But when I was a kid, 10 years old, if I was ill, a bottle of Lucozade would always appear in the house. Have some sugar, that'll fix it. Yeah. And that's got worse, progressively worse, because now it's more hidden, and the messages around food, it's very ambiguous.
I couldn't believe it when I remember being with someone's one of my friends around their house, and their parents were there and the grandparents were there, and there was something about salt and sugar came up, and I remember the grandmother saying something about you do need salt in your diet, and she was talking about table salt. Well, obviously table salt isn't one of the salts that we do need in our diet. There's no human nutritional value in that at all. Something else I was reading about the other day which I found really interesting. That was the Big Mac, McDonald's Big Mac. The place where you could go and take your children for a birthday party. Mm-hmm. In a McDonald's Big Mac, there is 3 grams of salt.
Yep.
And I thought, well, yeah, I can sort of that's what I was sort of expecting. But what I wasn't expecting was there's 9 grams of sugar.
Yeah, I was going to say, close to 10 grams of sugar.
Yep. There's 3 times as much sugar in a Big Mac than there is. And of course, salt and sugar has no nutritional value at all to the human body. which is just other than with sugar, the energy that you can gain from it in its purest form, which will go straight to fat. So I was just amazed reading that. I knew they weren't good, but I didn't realise how not.
But also knowing that if you go and have a burger at McDonald's and you have some of that doughy bread, you can actually taste the sugar in it.
Start noticing what's going on inside a Big Mac.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, starch turns to glucose anyway, so if you chew a piece of bread long enough, it will start tasting sweet. But the bread used in McDonald's, as soon as you put it in your mouth, you can start tasting the sweetness.
Yeah. Can I ask you what the future is for yourself, Andrew? Is there a future? Do you ever...
What is the future? At the moment, I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. And despite my years, I'm hoping to be doing this for a while longer. I'm sort of thinking another 10, maybe 15 years in the industry. And
if your body holds up, that is, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. But as a personal trainer, people also think, and there's a misconception that I have to do everything with my clients. I don't. I'm there to advise. I'm there to make sure they're safe, that they're doing things correctly. So I don't work out with my clients. Yes, I work out every day on my own, but if I see 5-6 clients in a day, there's no way I could work out 5-6 times with each client. So a lot of my job is verbal, and it's giving instructions, it's advice, it's programming. So there's a lot of admin as well. Working from home, it's writing programs. So even if my body does give up, I can probably carry on successfully doing the job I do at the moment. It'd probably upset me a little bit if I can't train myself, but I'm hoping that's not something that'll happen. Long term, I'd like to go back to Australia, and we're talking a long way down the track. So retirement, it'd be nice to sort of sell up, buy a nice camper van with an air conditioning unit, and circumnavigate Australia. Just jump in and drive.
The whole country would be of interest to you.
Absolutely, yeah. Because even living there for 12 years, it's vast. It's enormous. So I've only seen a very, very small fraction of it. And up north, you've got the tropics. Then you've got the deserts. You've got snowfields down south. You've got the reefs either side. So you've got Barrier Reef on one side. On the east coast, you've got Nigaloo Reef. On the west coast, on the Indian Ocean. The country's so diverse that you could spend years driving around there and probably still not catch all of it.
A good way to spend your last 30 or 40 years on this planet.
And there is actually a whole community that actually call them grey nomads in Australia, who do exactly that. They sell everything, all material goods, everything they own, sell it, buy a Winnebago or a camper van, and just travel around the country. Something
else I read reminded me about the Winnebago, that someone took Winnebago to court apparently because they jumped in the back seat from driving it, set it onto auto drive.
So some sort of autopilot thing.
Autopilot, and put the kettle on, and it crashed.
Shocking.
Because it wasn't made clear to them that actually it wouldn't be a safe thing to do. You can't leave your seat. It's that made me laugh. Something I read a few years ago. So look, it's been really great having you on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
There's some very interesting parts to your life, and I'd hope that you'd come back if we ask.
Absolutely. We can come back and have another chat and delve a little bit deeper into the health and wellness side of things.
Andrzej Zyms, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
So that's the last of what we're talking about today on the second of our podcasts. And if you like what you've heard or seen, if you've been watching it on YouTube, then please like and subscribe. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Andrzej Zyms.
Thank you.